can we talk about improving a weak body part? And specifically, I think legs are something that a lot of guys need to focus on. And it's looking at what's the first thing we do? Because my thought is, and tell me if I'm wrong here, Scott, I want to evaluate what's going on with somebody's legs, because I've seen guys that have strong quads but then no hamstrings. I've seen guys, and that I've been in that situation. I've been in the same situation where then I've had strong hamstrings but no glutes. I've seen guys that have
not anymore.
Not anymore.
Not weak anymore.
And it's taken some thinking,
Yeah.
I've seen the situation, and I've been there too, where I've had a stronger outer sweep on my quads than I have, the inner thigh and the adductor. So what's the first thing that we would do? Would it be, my thought is to analyze what we're looking at first of all, as far as your leg development goes?
Well, let me take a step back. Usually this is arms. I hear this question the most: guys want bigger arms.
Okay.
I get that all the time, like constantly. I can hear Paul Carter's voice in the back of my head because he gets the same thing. People want bigger arms because arms are the showiest muscle. And the thing is, and this could be for legs if someone is more advanced or any muscle group, but that's the one. Arms are by far the most common one. Is if you're not growing everywhere, why would you expect a weak muscle group to grow?
Okay.
So if you're not adding weight in some way, let's say you've been training for 3 or 4 years or even longer, and everything has grown fairly well except for this lagging muscle group or groups, and now you're thinking that you can somehow magically twist things around with your training or what have you, such that you don't have to have an excess of calories coming in. You don't have to be growing overall, and you can somehow propel forward the most stubborn muscle groups in your body.
Yeah.
Not going to happen. Just not going to happen. I mean, unless you haven't been training them in some way, shape, or form. Chances are you have. So are you eating enough? Are you recovering enough? Are you training progressively? All those things have to be in place. And a lot of times that's it. Like if you're 180 pounds and let's say you're 200 pounds, you started at 170, you gained 30 pounds, and it's been mostly upper body. You have been training your legs in an evenly balanced, like push-pull legs type fashion or something like that. You have been neglecting them.
Okay.
So, and they're just not growing. And so then you try for the next year to gain some leg size, and your weight goes from 200 to 200. It doesn't change.
Okay.
Like you have to be, you may have to, let's say in general, like your leg size increases half as much as the other muscles do. That's probably a good indicator that that's what may happen, all other things being equal in the future. You're trying to shift that ratio. You're trying to like make the gains happen in those weaker muscle groups. Dante, which we'll cover later, DC training, one of the things he used to say is that all in all, you can bring up weak muscle groups, but you will end up being sort of a larger version of yourself.
Yeah.
And somewhat close to the same proportions. And there's a good deal of truth to that. You can bring up weak muscle groups, but you're not going to take someone who is just like has a Tom Platz relative symmetrical balance and turn them into Flex Wheeler.
Right.
It's not going to happen. So all in all, you need to make sure everything is moving forward, and so that you got especially the caloric excess and enough recovery in place, all the basics of your training. So that's the first and a lot of times that's the thing is that you've got people who are not wanting to put on body fat. They're not willing to push the gains in general, first and foremost, before they're going to, in order to put on size in the weaker muscle group. And you may have to just you may have to sacrifice more in terms of conditioning or body fat in order to get the size to happen in those weak muscle groups than you ever did before.
Okay.
If your arms and chest or your back, whatever it was, that grew easily, and you didn't have to really gain a whole lot of body, it just grew naturally, that's great. You may have to really like push the weight up substantially in order to get those weak muscle groups to budge.
Yeah, that makes sense then.
There's a reason why they don't grow. And, some of the things we'll get to here, but some of those things you may not ever be able to overcome necessarily. And it could be things like the relative density of satellite cells that are in those muscles. I have the sense, I've had this for a while, that there's something that happens developmentally, epigenetically, or in terms of satellite cells based on your activity when you're younger.
Okay.
And I've talked about a friend of mine who was an amazing bench presser, but she didn't have strength in any other lift because she started bench pressing when she was 6.
Okay.
And so she was a phenomenal bench presser.
Yeah.
And like world class. Like she could have set world records in the raw bench press without even training for it. But everything else was pretty normal strength wise.
Okay.
But she bench pressed every day starting at the age of 6 until she was like 18.
So yeah, it would stand to be that she would be strong on that exercise.
So she was great on the exercise, and you could see it in her musculature too. But so there was probably some interaction between what she was doing and what was activated genetically and epigenetically, according to what her genes would allow. That just couldn't happen.
Yeah.
Thereafter, like so much of what makes us the adults we are today, and this psychologically, is a function of what you've been exposed to as a child, as a kid. And obviously, like your family of origin is huge psychological effect. Anyway, that can go on. That's a whole other topic. But what you can do now as an adult is that we're talking about today. So making muscle grow, we're thinking about basic stuff like loading it. So progressive overload, metabolic stress, muscle damage, cell swelling may have an effect, and then stretching, or at least having a full range of motion potentially. And there's a little bit of research suggesting that can be somewhat helpful, but that's even a mixed body literature too. So first and foremost, is someone progressively overloading the muscle, and is the muscle receiving the load during the exercise? And that's a function of mind-muscle connection and doing the exercises that are chosen for you.
Yeah.
Metabolic stress, are you feeling the muscle? So if you, like, a lot of people will find that muscles that are their strong muscles, I think you've talked about this, like if you go and train your calves, you probably get this just ridiculously unbearable pump in your calves.
Sure.
It's like fucking and you're complaining about it. You're like, oh my God, this hurts so fucking bad.
Yeah.
And right? Is that true? I mean, is it?
Yeah. But then I can't get it in a weaker body part, or it takes a lot of work, right?
Okay. Yeah. So there's something going on there, something about like metabolic stress. And that's a whole other body of literature we've gone into a little bit. It's interesting, very interesting developmental. It's interesting because a lot of people are saying that there's some literature suggesting that metabolic stress per se, the way I'm looking at it, is that there has to be loading during the metabolic stress in order to make it into a stimulus for muscle growth. But the fact that you get so much metabolic stress, you get such a pump, you get so much cell swelling, probably is connected with the fact that your calves are just ridiculously big.
Okay, yeah.
So those muscles that you can't get a pump in are also the ones that don't grow very well. Why can't you get a pump there? Well, they're not loaded appropriately, or you can't connect with them during the exercises that you've chosen to do.
Yeah.
So you're missing the mind-muscle connection there. And then stretch is something that I've included in my in the fortitude training. Fortitude training program is choosing some sort of a post-training stretch that will have a metabolic stress under loading, like an extreme stretch from DC training, what I call an inclusion stretch, and there's just a flexibility stretch, which is just not meant to be particularly stressful. I just think maintaining flexibility makes sense. It just makes common sense, basically, in terms of limiting injury potential, especially if you're want to do loaded exercises during full range of motion. But there's something about an active contraction, and you can produce muscle growth with isometrics that it could be a novel stimulus for someone who doesn't do that. A lot of people who've come and done fortitude training at the camps I put on, they've just skipped the stretches.
Really?
They just don't do them. Yeah, it's the one thing, like, we'll train like legs, and I'll run them through muscle rounds or the loading sets or whatever we do, and then I say, okay, now let's do the stretch. Or like, oh yeah, I read about that in the book. And I'm like, we haven't been doing those. Like, no. I was like, well, let me show you this quad stretch. They're like, holy fucking shit.
Yeah.
It blows them away how much that hurts.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So there's something to say there in terms of creating a stress that may be novel or new. And this gets back to what basically the global theme that I'm getting at here with bringing up this weak muscle group is that if you keep doing what you've been doing, you'll keep getting what you've been getting, as Ronnie used to say.
Yeah.
You got to do something different. You have to create a novelty of stimulus if you want to create new growth.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
And yeah. I mean, that's sort of a extension of general adaptation syndrome. Hans-Selye's general adaptation syndrome is that you need to produce some sort of novel stimulus if you want to produce a novel adaptation. In this case, novel meaning growth where it wasn't happening before.
Yeah.
Supporting that with recovery and nutrients, food, caloric excess. So that stretch under load is something that, like, Perillo used to do these, and Dante always gave credit to Perillo. He used to have people do stretches between exercises. Or between sets for an exercise, and I have people do it afterwards for an extended period, 60, 90 seconds.
Okay.
So that's something that can be added as that's sort of take home number one. Start stretching. One, it creates a stimulus. Two, especially if you do like a quad stretch where you like pull your heel back to your butt or put your foot on, like, I usually use like a lat pull down pad, or put my foot on the pad of a knee extension machine or something at about hip height.
Okay.
And then pull your hip into extension, and your knees obviously in deep flexion. So you're stretching both the rectus femoris, the iliopsoas a little bit, and the quad. And then contract during that as you try to deepen the stretch somewhat.
Yeah.
After you've just trained, those are absolutely brutal. You will feel pain and connection in the muscle in a way that probably most people have, if they haven't done that kind of stretch before, have never felt in their life. Then you'll know what it's like to connect with a muscle while you're training and while you're contracting it. I think this deepens that neuromuscular connection for many people, because you're learning how to contract a muscle while it's under pain like that, which a lot of times that's the last thing you want to do.
Yeah.
When people are pushing their sets towards that failure point, they'll take a break.
Okay.
They'll stop for a split second. That releases the tension in the muscle, allows the blood flow to carry out waste products that are activating those pain fibers, the nociceptor pyrus. That's why you do that, because it relieves the pain and allows a little recovery so you can get a few more reps.
Yeah, I remember doing a set the first time I tried to do like a muscle round, and I wasn't doing the consistent fluid reps. I'd do a rep and then I'd stop, and do a rep and then I'd stop. And you would said, no, you explained to me it's like just walking straight off a cliff without hesitation. Yeah. And it's hard to do that. It's taken time, but I get what you mean though, that then it's a constant tension is what you're saying.
Yeah, there's a reason for doing that and avoiding those extended sets like that to save the nervous system taxation.
Okay.
That's a reason why I have continuous sets, and we'll get to that with the DC training question that we'll get to later if we have time.
Okay.
But yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about, is that people are trying to avoid that because you want to like turn those muscles off when they start to hurt. That's exactly what you're looking for.
You called it self-preservation to me.
Yeah. I see pups are in the background. Yeah, it is. Exactly. It's a matter of like you're trying to avoid the pain and suffering there, and it's a subconscious thing. But really, that's what you want.
Yeah. It's hard, man, because it hurts so fucking bad. You know, that's your first inclination is to give it a rest. You know,
that's what you want, though. That's exactly what you want. You're trying to hurt yourself.
Yeah. Right.
In a non-injurious way.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So that's the whole thing. So this stretch, especially the extreme stretches when you're holding a load, and of course that requires a contraction to hold the load. And the occlusion stretch in fortitude training is you're just pressing against a bar or a wall or an immovable object, and you're contracting as hard as you possibly can while you're in a deep stretch. Not trying to go with max range of motion per se, although you want a deep one. Just the stretch and the contraction of itself creates that occlusion. So you're basically practicing contracting under extreme pain.
Yeah.
And you're also getting probably an angle specific range of motion training effect there too. So if you have people train knee extensions at 30 degrees of knee flexion versus 90 degrees of knee flexion, they'll get better at the 30-degree training if they train at that angle than if they do at 90 degree. There's an angle specificity of training effect there.
I could see
so that. It's probably if like you're doing your like pec stretches like this and you're contracting under pain, you're doing an isometric. You're going to develop some isometric strength in that range of motion with your hands there.
Sure.
This has not been documented because the endpoint would be literally injury, probably.
Okay.
You could measure isokinetic strength through a full range of motion and see if there's like an increase in strength at that angle. But probably training or doing an occlusion stretch, as I've kind of termed it, where you're pushing as hard as you can, probably produces an angle-specific increase in strength and ability to contract there, and probably stability in the joint, blah, 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 in a way that is a good thing in terms of preventing an injury. It can't be bad to a practice producing force in this part of the range of motion where you're in that deep stretch and probably at greater risk of injury. So there's something to say for that. So that's one thing that people can add. Looking for a novelty. I'm just going through this PowerPoint that I put together. So
can I throw something in here? Because I feel like
please.
here's something I've thought of is that I think about, we'll take a guy who say was trying to bring his legs up. I think a lot of times, even like a guy who's been training for 5 years, the first thought is to just do, like you said, just do this consistent push-pull legs. You're training everything consistently the same. And then you find that you have a weakness. I think the first thing my thought was to figure out what that weakness was. Would you, and I don't know if this will throw you off from the almost like the lecture you had put together previously, but weak legs, there's going to be a part of your leg that is weak, right? And I guess my thought is it's, to me, a big part of it to begin with is understanding the anatomy of what muscles are weak. Because if I'm moving weight, I'm moving the weight with something, and that I found that for me, that like I had said before, like, maybe at one point I had stronger quad sweep, but then the adductors looked weaker, or maybe my quads were stronger, but then the hamstrings were weaker. And it's almost, for me, it was like figuring out how to make those legs improve. It was figuring out what was doing the work to begin with, because weak hamstrings were a sign that maybe I was doing more work with my hips or with the quads, versus putting the load into the hamstrings. Is this anything? Does this make sense to you where I'm going with this?
Yeah, you bring up another very important point. It relates to when I started with the arms thing. Is that, and this is one that Dante used to say too, is, and it applies especially to legs. First of all, get some big fucking legs.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Like if you're let's say you're 5'8" or 5'10" and you're 170 pounds soaking wet with a bag of nickels in your pocket, as he used to say sometimes too, and all these Dantes are coming up, popping in my head, but they all make sense. Then you just need size first and foremost.
Yeah.
So don't worry about nitpicking, and those smaller things. Then what you're talking about is exercise selection. We're getting there, but we can just move right ahead in figuring out what exercises or what variations on those exercises target the musculature that you're trying to train in the leg here in the thigh.
Okay.
So hamstrings, knee extensors, the knee extensors, the hamstrings, knee flexors, hip extensors. So, and you can figure that out by obviously looking at the biomechanics, or Paul's favorite topic, look at the EMG, which I would do. That would be my last choice. Or where you feel it during the exercise. What do you feel? And that's probably, I would probably put that at the top of my hierarchy, to be perfectly honest.
What do you feel?
What do you feel? I'll tell you why in just a second.
Okay.
Or where you get sore, and that's up there as well. So you can look at the biomechanics and see what this is supposed to do. This is where the muscles, which muscles should be the prime movers, which are secondary. You can look at an EMG study that shows you maybe what the average person tends to produce in terms of EMG activity relative to an isometric max, or however they relativized it. But none of that friggin' matters if the way you do things, you don't feel it in the muscles that you want to feel it in, and you don't get sore in the muscles that you want to be training and doing those exercises.
Yeah.
So if you do squats, and this is my example for me, you used to do barbell squats in the way that I feel like I could really do them, and I did them for well over a decade, and I got really strong at them. And it was a great glute builder. I had a gigantic glutes, but I did not get the leg size that I wanted.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking too. That's what I've seen in my own life, that kind of stuff.
It was not a good choice for me.
Yeah.
And I mean, I would feel it in my legs to a certain degree, but I would feel it in my glutes, and I saw what grew, and I saw what was sore. And so that exercise was a poor choice for me. That's basically goes back to being your own bodybuilding coach, be your own Buddha, trusting your own self, listening to your own body, literally, as opposed to relegating your decision-making process to what someone else tells you,
right?
Or what some study tells you the average person might find, because there always are outliers. Averages, and this goes back to the topic of biological individuality, there's a huge spread among people, among humans, in basically every physiological and biological variable that you'd measure. We're all very, very similar. We have the same enzymes and of glycolysis and some of the same basic processes. But if you look at how those things all fit together, it's all over the place.
Yeah,
and that's one of the topics I'll talk about. Like, just look at people's body fats. Go to the mall, look at body fat. Look at how well people grow in the gym. Everyone's turning on protein synthesis. Not everyone. Some people don't turn on protein synthesis for shit after an exercise session. You can look at the data. There are some individuals that don't. There's like zilch as far as a blip.
Really?
And increased protein synthesis. Yeah, the data are there. Like Stu Phillips has got a number of studies where they plot the individual data points. Just like people don't grow.
Yeah.
There's non-responders. There are people that don't increase cardiovascular VO2 max. They don't increase cardiovascular fitness. Doesn't happen. Then there are friggin' monsters. There's Lance Armstrong types of people. And Big Ramy type of people that grow like friggin' weeds. So there's no reason then to think, and you can look at the data if you could have access to it. You're going to see the same things in terms of relative activation of quads versus hamstrings on a given exercise. You see it even like things like glycemic index when you compare like maltodextrin versus white bread. Some people have a higher GI for one versus the other. Some people are flip-flopped. Those things are all over the place. There's so much variability there. So you have to listen to what your body is telling you, and to think the best way for exercises is where you're feeling it, which is up to you to a certain degree. So first thing would be choose the right exercises. And if you need to, this is what my Instagram channel is about to a certain degree, then get funky with it, which is another Danteism. Find an exercise and do it in a way that works for you. If you want more hamstrings, there's obviously things like use a wider stance, externally rotate. That'll get your glutes involved a little bit more too. Put your feet higher on a leg press. Various ways to change your stance. Put the bar lower on a squat, not so much a high bar. Change the depth in a way that works for you. A lot of times going deeper will hit more glutes, hamstrings too.
Yeah.
You'll have to go lighter as well. So those things. And then there also is, of course, the mind-muscle connection, which you can definitely change. And there are ways to do that too. And that's like one of the next kind of big topics. But did that cover your idea there?
Yeah.
So pick the right exercises and then vary them for you.
Okay. Yeah, because I think that in itself, I feel like any of these things could really be beneficial for somebody who is, stopping and looking, okay, I've been doing this for 5 years, and what am I seeing as results? It's like, is everything growing uniformly? And if not, what can I alter to make this look better? Because, we talked about it on the phone briefly yesterday, just to kind of brainstorm on this. And it's like you said, this is bodybuilding. It's not just the growth of the muscle, but it's the sculpting and the shape we're trying to create, right?
Yeah, the symmetry and the physique that you're trying to create. You're just not like if you have like, let's say you're just kind of built like a mountain gorilla with small legs and huge arms, upper body.
Yeah.
That's probably what you want for a bodybuilding stage.
Yeah.
You want to be able to, equalize those things in a way that creates the prettiest physique possible. But you
Absolutely.
have to be growing overall. So first grow overall, then make sure your exercises are chosen correctly, and then varied correctly, and then perform correctly neurologically,
Yeah.
which is the mind-muscle connection. And that can take a swallowing your ego type of thing. So progressive food, progressive overload, exercise selection, exercise modification, exercise execution, and then that kind of leads us to the idea of the mind-muscle connection. So, gosh, a lot of things we have there. One, visualizing, seeing this,
Yeah.
initiating a lot of people, like even with beginners, you can just tell them like on a lot of the studies have been done with like a bench press. So they use your triceps more or use your pecs more,
Okay.
and people can do that.
Yeah.
They can make that happen. One of the things that seems to make sense, at least from one particular study with glutes, is if you try to initiate the movement, then this is all about having an internal attentional focus, where you're basically, and there's a conundrum here, where your attention is internal on the muscle itself. So you're visualizing, you're thinking about it, you're feeling it,
Yeah.
as opposed to an external attentional focus. Wow, came out of nowhere. An external attentional focus, like a powerlifter has.
Yeah. Yeah.
As long as the bar goes from point A to point B, that's all that matters.
Right.
And their knees get to the right angle, or their hips roll to their knees, all those sorts of things. But they're just trying to move the weight. Or for us, we're trying to stimulate the muscle, and they're completely opposite. The conundrum, the paradox, the oxymoron here is that you have an external load that is going to be moved while all your focus is on what's happening internally.
Okay.
And we tend, as bodybuilders, to want to monitor what's being produced internally as the stimulus by recording in a logbook and watching externally what happens with the weight in terms of the load and the reps, the number of sets, and the volume. So all those things are external to the body. That's a performance phenomenon.
Yeah.
We're trying to create the stimulus to make the muscle grow. We're not trying to move the weight. The weight, in the truest sense of the word, really the weight and the reps and the load and the frequency, all those things are secondary to what we're really trying to do, which is create the stimulus, physiological stimulus that produces the muscle growth. So you would want to move the load through a range of motion to complete a full repetition, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But like, for instance, here's a great example. Break this down, because I was getting a little esoteric there. You'll see sometimes like really strong incline pressures, or even bench press. Let's just take an incline where you see it most often. Like Chris Cormier comes to mind. I think he used to do this. He would not go all the way down to his chest. A lot of guys would not lock out. So in a lockout, it tends to be a lot of triceps. Most powerlifters will agree there. Well, bodybuilders, they're not trying to like perform complete reps, because it doesn't fucking matter.
Right.
They're trying to use the exercise to train the chest.
Right.
And so you pick the range of motion which feels like it can best activate the chest. And in this case, with a big heavy weight, for a lot of those guys, going really, really deep didn't make sense.
Right.
So they didn't do that. And going to the end just meant fatiguing the triceps, creating a weak link to the exercise, so the triceps would fatigue before the chest, and then your set would be ended prematurely.
Yeah.
Not what you want. You want the weak link to be the target muscle, which in this case, pectoralis major.
Yeah.
Maybe the pec minor. So you pick a range of motion that makes that exercise one to target the muscle.
Yeah.
So that's someone who's got a smart, well-attuned, probably kind of unconscious, intuitive, internal attentional focus on training the pecs, and they're not worried about someone saying on Instagram, bruh, what's up with your partial reps? Like, do a full rep. Like, what's up with that? Full rep doesn't matter. Like, there's no one who's going to say, best chest on stage, but he never did full reps on his incline, so we're not going to pay attention to his chest. It doesn't matter. You're using the load in the exercise simply as a tool. So you want to be internally focused.
Yeah.
There. So initiating with the target muscle seems to help with that. Going too heavy in the studies is like something above like an 80% of a 1 rep max, which would be for a lot of those chest presses, like an 8 rep max, something like that. So if your reps are getting below like maybe 6 or 8, then you've gone above where most people can maintain a mind-muscle connection in those studies, and those are using EMGs, so they do have, the EMG does have some value. So, and the thing is, here's the deal: if you're at 100% of a 1 rep max, you're using all the muscle available.
Yeah.
It's a 1 rep max. It's triceps and chest and anterior delts for bench press, let's say. So you can't have any mind-muscle connection. If you did, you'd have to lower the load because you'd be disengaging some of those other muscles,
right,
to make it a preferential pec exercise. It's no longer a 1 rep max. So once you get to that heavier load, in order just to move it, you have to use everything.
Yeah.
You can't preferentially train. So if you're triceps dominant or you're a delt presser, as a lot of people are, and you've gone too heavy, you can't make that into a chest exercise when you're doing those presses.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, so if, let's say you're trying to bring your quads up on a squat or what have you, and you just tend to be someone who just drives with the posterior chain, and you use your glutes and your low back, and you're getting to where you're doing, and this is what I probably did for many years. I did these heavy-ass squats. And because I went so damn heavy, I had to use, in order to even move those weights, I had to use the muscles that I naturally engaged in order to lift the heavy weights.
Yeah, yeah.
I couldn't have a mind-muscle connect. It was mathematically, physiologically impossible for me to have a mind-muscle connection and still do those types of reps.
Yeah.
With that heavy load and make it into a quad exercise, which is what I would have preferred.
Yeah, that makes sense. I could think of it in my own training for sure.
Yeah, so you go too heavy. If you try to go too fast, that also happens when have people try to do ballistic movements. It doesn't work. Because fast means all out effort. You run into the same issue. You're going to use everything you can. Move the bar as fast as you can. Well, you're going to use as much muscle as you can.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, if you were a highly trained person who's got a good mind-muscle connection, and you said, okay, I want you to lift this weight only using your pecs. I want your best mind-muscle connection. We're going to get your 1 rep max, maintain that best mind-muscle connection. You're a highly disciplined, Jedi of the weight room, and you can do that. Well, you're especially for me, when I'm training chest in that way, the loads that I can use go way the fuck down.
Yeah,
way the hell down, because I'm a pretty decent overhead presser, and I'm like, I can overhead press, behind the neck press, not with my shoulder the way it is, but it's getting better now. Just about what I can incline press, and which is just about what I can bench press. Like, I'm just about as strong overhead as I am with like a flat or nearly flat. I usually don't do flat presses very often, and that's just because my chest is relatively so weak compared to my delts. So if I use a true mind-muscle connection and make my chest the target muscle and the weak link on pressing movements, then I'm a lot weaker.
I bet, yeah.
Yeah. So you can look at that and just take the comment. So let's say you're just someone who has just these oversized hamstrings and glutes, and you're doing compound leg presses and squatting movements to try to train. In particular, you want to bring your quads up. You want to make quads the most focused muscle for those exercises. So you might want to just ditch some of those exercises. Stop doing squats if you can't find a comfortable way to do squats and that hits your quads in a way that you feel and that makes them sore. Adjust your foot placement. Maybe do them more like Platts did. That works for you. Or if you're doing a leg press, like I have people do like a low, close leg press, so they bring their feet like really, really close and low on the foot plate. That tends to hit the quads really, really well. Just biomechanically, it forces that to happen. And then let's say you haven't done those. It's just like, so you've got like a neutral stance. If in your neutral stance, you know that you're driving with those strong, sort of predominantly neurologically wired muscles, the posterior chain muscles, and that's how you're able to lift the heavy loads you've lifted. Now you want to engage a mind-muscle connection and make it a quad-dominant exercise, and your quads are just shit compared to your hamstrings and glutes. Well, guess what? The weight's going to have to go down if you're going to have the mind-muscle connection.
Yeah.
That's just the math of it. Now you're trying to rely more upon the smaller muscle mass, and you're basically disengaging, which can happen too. The research shows that people can disengage, people have been able to disengage the traps while doing side lateral movements that are supposed to hit the deltoids. They can even newbies can make that happen. So you can like literally use a focus on the muscle you're trying to hit, the weak one, while you intentionally disengage the others. So you're doing those leg presses, let's say with the neutral position because you've chosen that and you like it, you want to stick with that. And let's say normally you're using whatever 6 plates on a side on the leg press, and now you want to make it into you want to say, okay, I need to hit my quads. My quads never get sore doing this exercise either. I'm going to give it up. I don't want to, but I have limited equipment, various reasons. I'm still going to do these leg presses. You're not going to be able to use 6 plates anymore.